Oh my God, this is embarrassing. He hasn't given a single substantive argument yet. It's all just weird cringe.
The Hamas, Hitler. Answer the question, Norm, for God's sake. You said you don't want to evade the truth. Should Hamas stay in power or not? Answer the question.
Piers, either you're going to moderate the program or...
Oh my God, but he's not going to answer it.
Let me finish my sentence, please.
October 7th.
Let me ask you this.
1,200 Jews were burned to death, slaughtered, and no democracy should allow that, except for one person, Norm Finkelstein.
He's suffering from Judeo-dementia.
It's not Shmuley who suffers dementia.
Rabbi Shmuley seems incapable of processing very basic facts.
Do you think that, in principle, Hamas should stay in power?
Answer the question.
Allow me to finish.
Welcome to both of you. Let me start.
What the was the point of that editing? Oh my God.
We seem to be reaching a point here where something has to give. Either Israel stops obliterating Gaza and killing so many innocent people in the process, or I'm not sure what the alternative is. How do you read where we are with this war?
There are many ways to read it. You can read it politically, you can read it militarily, you can read it strategically, or you can read it from a point of view of human rights and international law, so long
Oh boy.
as it bears on human rights. Now, when it comes to the very last consideration, I think it's very clear how we should read it. Namely, the International Court of Justice, the supreme judicial body in the world, has said that Israel is under two obligations. Obligation number one is to honor the laws of war in what it's doing in Gaza. And obligation number two, Israel has to provide humanitarian aid and assistance to the people of Gaza. Those are its two obligations under international law. The court also ruled that Israel is plausibly committing genocide, and there is no evidence whatsoever, zero evidence, that since the court ruling, Israel has changed its tactics or its strategy in Gaza. So as of now, as we speak, Israel is still, by the conclusion of 15 judges in the International Court of Justice, 15 of the 17 judges, Israel is committing genocide or plausibly committing genocide, and it's not honoring its obligations as they were spelled out by the International Court of Justice.
Okay, Rabbi Shmuley, you tweeted this morning when we booked you for this debate. You called Norman Finkelstein an anti-Semite. You said, "You have my word that God willing, I will digitally decapitate, digitally disembowel, and digitally destroy him." Do you think that was the right kind of rhetoric before you try and debate such a serious matter?
First of all, thank you for having me back, Piers. It's nice to see you. And Norm, I hope you don't mind if I call you Norm. You can please call me Shmuley. Norman Finkelstein is on the show for only one reason. If the journalistic idiom that Jews are news is true, because Israel's this big, it gets this much attention, then how much more so Jewish anti-Semites get the brightest headlights. Norman Finkelstein is the foremost Jewish anti-Semite on planet Earth. He actually attacked his own parents.
Broke him with his slogans ready. What?
Whose only crime was to be Jewish. Their entire family was annihilated in Warsaw. They're not victims. They hated Germans and wanted them dead. He didn't think to himself, maybe my parents wanted the Germans to suffer, to stop the war, to break the will of the German people, to stop murdering, gassing 10,000 Jews per day. His hatred of the Jewish people has extended even to his own family. He calls Israel a satanic state that comes from the boils of hell. He calls it a vandal state. He said that the 15 people murdered in the Charlie Hebdo massacres, he has no sympathy for them whatsoever. But this is the most telling thing of all, and you discussed this the last time. He said, on October 7th, hours after the massacre of 1,200 Jews started, he wrote, "It warms every fiber of my soul to see the children of Gaza smiling as their arrogant Jewish supremacists that have been humbled. The stars above in heaven are looking down. Glory, glory, hallelujah." Let's just go through this. 400 women shot in the genitals, their breasts cut off as terrorists played with their bloody breasts like a football. Glory, hallelujah. Women shot in their genitals, Norm. Glory. You should be a televangelist. Glory, hallelujah. Children burned to death and beheaded. Glory, hallelujah. Come on. You're a fair person, Piers.
This is going to be stupid. Who the fuck is this guy?
This is exactly what your friend Douglas Murray said, because he refuses to debate Norman Finkelstein. He called him a sociopath. He said Norman Finkelstein is a psychotic. He's not on your show because he's a serious academic. Wolfgang Benz, professor of Ellingen, who was one of the foremost German historians of the Holocaust, said the only thing interesting about Norman Finkelstein is that he needs a psychiatrist.
Okay, well, look,
Professor Wolfgang, wait, Professor Wolfgang.
I want to just ask you this, though. You see, it's interesting. Norman Finkelstein gave I thought, a pretty measured argument in response to my first question. You've gone ad hominem immediately and attacked the man, not the issue, and not the question that I asked you, which is to respond to what he was saying, which is a growing feeling around the world, by the way, that Israel is now committing, as he put it, as the court said, a plausible genocide. I don't happen to think it is genocide they're doing, but what I do think is happening is that there is a shameful number of innocent women and children being slaughtered on a daily basis, and I don't see what the end game is, other than the obliteration of most of Gaza and many people living there. So to answer that point,
Let me answer your question directly. First of all, when you quote President Lula of Brazil, he is a criminal who served in jail for corruption. He has zero credibility. He also knows nothing about history. 10,000 Jews were gassed a day for 4 years.
What? Oh my God. Is there any debate? Is this actually a real debate? Or is it, who the fuck is this fucking loser? This is embarrassing. Rabbi Shmuley? Is he like a Twitter guy? He hasn't given a single substantive argument yet. It's all just weird, cringe fucking...
After the Wannsee Conference in January 1942, to compare that to Gaza is an abomination. Secondly, Norman Finkelstein is a liar. The International Court of Justice specifically said that Israel is not committing a genocide. So when you tell me, why do I go after Ad-Hominem? The International Court of Justice specifically said that Israel is not committing a genocide.
I don't remember them specifically saying that. Unless there was a new ruling or a new statement. They weren't making a ruling on that, but okay.
So when you tell me, why do I go after Ad-Hominem? I'm questioning his academic credentials. He just lied on international TV. South Africa sued to get the ICJ to declare that Israel's committing a genocide, and they said they're not committing a genocide, and they said they would not stop the Israeli offensive. That is a straight-out lie.
Okay, well, all right.
No,
If you're going to call him a liar, amongst other things you've called him, I'm going to go back to Norman Finkelstein and get him to respond to that.
Would you like me to respond now?
Yes, please. Yeah, I think it's only reasonable you should. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure what was the purpose to inviting either me or...
Oh my God, his talking speed is so slow. How am I gonna survive in a real one-on-one debate? This is his real talking speed. Holy shit.
Yeah, I think it's only reasonable you should, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure what was the purpose to inviting either me or Mr. Shmuley to this program, because obviously we are in two entirely different wavelengths. Mr. Shmuley is in the business, which is not surprising, of character assassination. He's in the business of libel. That's his job, because where he have to confront the facts, he would be in a very difficult situation. So let me make one clarification. None of
I only deal in facts. Is he gonna say his trademark?
my remarks bear on my personal opinions. I simply am repeating what the documentary record shows. Now, according to Mr. Shmuley, I am a
I think he said this in almost every single debate I've listened to him say. I only deal in facts. These aren't my opinions. These are just the facts. These are the facts.
liar because, according to Mr. Shmuley, the International Court of Justice explicitly concluded that Israel was not committing a genocide. Now, I concluded, according to Mr. Gerd shows. Now, according to Mr. Shmuley, I am a liar because, according to Mr. Shmuley, the International Court of Justice explicitly concluded that Israel was not committing a genocide. Now, I would say that Mr. Shmuley is suffering from what I would call a Judeo-dementia, because there is no possibility on earth that...
I like how Norm goes right into the personal attacks with him. Why not just respond to the facts? I feel like if your opponent is going to go that hard immediately, you have such a major W. Norman's first response was completely factual to him. This guy went completely ad hom. Norm should just respond with the facts by the ICJ. This guy's incorrect about it. The ICJ did not rule against genocide. How would they fucking do that? It was like a preliminary, like, statutory fucking hearing. You think they determined no genocide in like 2 weeks? What a stupid statement this guy made. Norm should just respond to the facts there. He has him dominated so hard.
That any rational human being could have read the opinion or the ruling rendered by the International Court of Justice after the South Africa application and after the oral proceedings. There is no possibility on earth that any rational person can conclude that the International Court of Justice ruled that Israel was not committing a genocide. So we now have two difficulties. Number one, Mr. Shmuley seems to think his purpose to being on the program is to personally attack me, the Latin term ad hominem attacks. Number two, Rabbi Shmuley seems incapable of processing very basic facts. If Mr. Shmuley believes that the International Court of Justice ruled explicitly that Israel was not committing genocide, if that's what he truly believes, then I would say he's suffering from some form of Judeo-dementia.
Okay, let me bring in...
May I respond?
Yes, you may, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Piers. You know, it's interesting, Piers, that you...
They're not going to do any factual debate on this, are they? This is just a waste of fucking time.
Norm are saying that I went ad hominem. No, I did not. I quoted his own words of Jewish anti-Semitism, vitriol, which are so extreme that they're shocking. I told you, he called his own parents haters of Germans. Not the Germans hated his parents and annihilated his family. His parents hated the Germans. But now he just now says, I suffer from Jewish dementia. Notice, it's not Shmuley who suffers dementia. It's always Jewish dementia. It's always Jews. Norman Finkelstein has now accused Israel of 5 different genocides. 1982, he accused Israel of genocide in Lebanon. It went on 2006, 2009, 2015. Now, this is the 5th. That means we Jews, I always thought Jews suck at sports and PR. We suck at genocide because we've attempted it 5 times, and yet in all the Arab-Israeli wars, Jews and Arabs together, the numbers that have died, including terrorists, are less than 100,000. Bashar al-Assad next door killed 600,000 in 2 years. We Jews ought to go to him and ask him, how do we finally do this? Because according to Norm, we've tried it for 30 years and we can't do it. In fact, since 1967, when Gaza came under Israeli control,
do they rule that Israel's committing a genocide? Okay, this is my understanding. I gave a cursory glance to an 11-page. There was an 11-page filing by ICJ, South Africa, Israel. This is my understanding of it. Somebody can tell me if. Actually, I might have read the whole thing. It's literally like, I think it's like 11 pages long. Somebody can tell me if I have an incorrect understanding of this. But my understanding was that South Africa said, hey, we want to bring a case to the ICJ claiming that Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinian people. And the ICJ's ruling was basically to check. It wasn't like a ruling. They were basically doing a check to see, well, there are other words for this, but I think it was like imagine it as being like a pre-trial hearing, basically, trying to assert whether or not statutorily South Africa could bring the case. So I think there were 2 questions that the ICJ was looking to answer. Can somebody find me this stupid fucking document? I think it's one of these. The 2 questions it was seeking to answer were, 1, is does South Africa have standing to bring this case, which they said that they do, and then 2 was, is it plausible that on its face, that, right, prima facie, on its face, is it plausible that what South Africa is asserting, that a genocide is happening right now in Gaza, is true? And then the ICJ looks at some statements by Israeli leaders, and then it looks at the amount of people killed, and it says, it's plausible. So the ICJ's pre-trial or whatever ruling was basically 2 things. It said to Israel, make sure that you keep adhering to international law, don't break that, that'd be really bad. And it said that in 1 month, you need to release a report to us showing that you're not committing genocide, whatever the fuck that means. I would have to see precisely what they demanded in that report, or even if they did precisely demand in that court. But that's literally all it was. Somebody's saying it was a provisional judgment. Okay, maybe. But basically, that's all that it was. They weren't making a ruling on like, there was genocide, there's not genocide. They're like, none of that. They were just basically seeing like, oh, well, do we feel like South Africa has standing to bring this case? And like, if we look at like the facts of the case, does it seem like it's plausible that they could be correct in their assertion here? Application, wait, this is not what I was actually thinking of. But that's essentially what that quote unquote ruling said. But I mean, I get like whether Israel is or isn't committing genocide wasn't the question of that particular ruling. It was just to see if there was standing for any of that case to move forward, basically.
Population of Gaza grew by 1 million people. How is that a genocide? Now, when Norm says that the ICJ said that Israel's committing a genocide, I repeat, Norm, respectfully, you are a fabricator. They said specifically that Israel has an obligation not to. South Africa asked for a cessation of hostilities. They refused. They repeated that refusal last week. How you could get on this program and actually fabricate? Well, I guess I know why, because even your mentors, Chicago professor Peter Nozick calls your scholarship, quote, trash. And this is trash because anyone can Google what we're saying.
Yeah, but Rabbi Shmuley, look, I'm going to jump in again because, again, what you're doing is attacking your other debater here.
He said I suffer from dementia, for God's sake. Why don't you call him out on that? Dementia? Seriously?
With respect, what you're not doing is answering the specific questions. There are many, there are many people around the world increasingly concerned about the scale of Israel's response, the appalling death toll.
Is that why he said prove that they explicitly said they weren't so we could get them on semantics? I mean, I don't really like the way either of them summarize it. Like when Finkelstein says they said it's plausible they're committing genocide, they didn't mean that as in like it's likely, like, oh my God, like they're just saying that like they have standing for the case. But Finkelstein is far more correct, however much I might dislike his characterization, he's far more correct than this guy's assertion that, oh, they said there was no genocide happening. That absolutely was not the case. It's not even there. I don't even know if he's familiar with what that like pre-trial motion or pre-trial hearing or what the fuck it even was. There wasn't like a whole analysis and ruling and everything that happened. That's just complete, unless there's something else released that I'm not aware of.
Of children, the appalling number of children also being orphaned, the appalling number of women being killed, innocent women, and they don't see an end game. They just see Israel continuing to bomb, kill. But how does this end? If the next stage is Rafah, which now has 6 times as many people in it as it did 4 months ago and is a huge refugee camp, and you're trying to find just a few thousand Hamas amongst over 1.5 million people, then you're going to get even more people around the world saying this is a senseless way of conducting war. Now, what do you say?
I hear you. Okay. In the lifetime of your parents, the greatest statesman of the 20th century, Winston Churchill, fought the greatest evil the world had ever seen. Now, the Americans used something called a
The thing is, in a similar preliminary ruling, the ICJ ordered Russia to cease all hostilities, and that was the main thing South Africa was hoping to get. So the fact that the ICJ denied the measure sort of hints at the fact that, based on the evidence they have, a genocide isn't too plausible. I would have to look at the ruling for Russia, but I think that the big issue with Russia is that Russia probably would fail internationally in the jus ad bellum part of international law that would govern whether or not you're allowed to resort to war. So I think Russia fails on its face because I don't think Russia has had an appropriate casus belli, has had an appropriate reason for war with Ukraine. That's why they call it, in some ways, a special military operation. But I mean, I don't think the international community recognizes that. They don't recognize that distinction. So the jus ad bellum part is basically like, do you even have a good reason to go to war? Russia doesn't. Israel does. As much as you might not like them, however much you might think it's bad, blah, blah, Israel has a good cause for war. Hamas killed a lot of their people. It's the ruling government of that territory, so they have reason to go to war. So now we move past that part. Where I don't even know if this jus ad bellum, jus in bello shit is like part of the ICJ ruling, but I would imagine it's probably a factor in here that if Russia doesn't have a cause to go to war, they'll say stop immediately. Israel, the ICJ did not tell them to stop immediately. The ICJ explicitly said that they need to continue to comply with international law while they conduct military operations. I think South Africa was looking to get, would you call it an injunction or a restraining order or a temporary restraining? I don't know what you would call it, but I think a stay on military, I don't know what you would call it, but I think South Africa was looking for, hey, the ICJ needs to tell Israel to stop their war, and the ICJ did not issue that ruling. They gave them permission essentially to continue conducting the warfare, but they just said you have to adhere to international law and you have to adhere to international international law, and you have to submit a report by the end of the month to say if you're committing genocide or not, basically. I don't know what that report looks like, but yeah. An injunction, is that what they were looking for? Sure. This is the court answer. Here's the ruling at the bottom. Would you be willing to talk to Mustafa Barghouti? That's not the guy, is it? That was jailed in the second Intifada or whatever? Oh, it's his cousin? If he wanted to, yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, obviously. Hell yeah, I would. Yeah. Whoa, Destiny, you said that they explicitly said to continue to follow international law, but did they actually include the continue? Because that implies a lot. I mean, basically, yeah. Hold on. I mean, we can read the ruling down here. This is what South Africa was requesting. The state of Israel shall immediately suspend its military operation. They shall ensure that any military or regular armed units which may be directed, supported, or influenced by, as well as any organizations and persons which may be subject to its control, direction, or influence, take no steps in furtherance of the military operations. Desist from killing members of group, blah, blah, blah. This is what they were asking for, basically, to stop. Yeah. This is like introducing like the facts of everything. I think this part here it gives a slight intro to the conflict. Cites some other international bodies. This goes over all of the preliminary observations. Is like basically saying, like, does South Africa have, I think, the ability to even bring this case? Do they have standing? And since South Africa and Israel are parties to the Geneva Convention, that means that basically South Africa does. I think in part of this it cites statements and actions by the country of Israel. Keep in mind for this, at the present stage of the proceedings, the court is not required to ascertain whether any violations of Israel's obligations under the Geneva Convention has occurred, because this is just a pre-trial hearing, basically. So they're not ruling on if they did or didn't, just if South Africa has standing and if it's plausible, if the facts prima facie establish a case. Conclusions as to the prima facie jurisdiction. In light of the foregoing, the court concludes that prima facie it has jurisdiction pursuant to Article 9 of the Geneva Convention to entertain the case, because the Geneva Convention is what regulates genocide, and South Africa and Israel are signatories to the Geneva Convention. And I believe that... the Genocide Convention. My bad. Genocide Convention. And I'm guessing the ICJ is who hears cases on this or makes rulings on this or whatever. And then, given the above conclusion, the court considers that it cannot accede to Israel's request that the case be removed from the general list. So Israel's, I don't know if you would consider it a motion, a cross motion, a response. I don't know what the verbiage would be, but Israel basically said you should dismiss this because South Africa doesn't have a reason to basically say any of this for them. The court has already found that at least some of the rights asserted by South Africa under the Genocide Convention are plausible. The court considers that by their very nature, at least some of the provisional measures sought by South Africa are aimed at preserving the plausible rights it asserts on the basis of the Genocide Convention in the present case, namely the rights of the Palestinians in Gaza, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, a link exists between the rights claimed by South Africa that the court found to be plausible and at least some of the provisional measures requested. I think that's basically saying, like, is the remedy or is the relief or remedy you're seeking reasonable? So, like, if I were to take somebody to court and say, this guy defamed me, I think that the damages are $100 or whatever. That might be, like, valid relief. If I say this guy defamed me as punishment, I should get to murder his entire family, the courts would say this remedy is outrageous. Or like in the Trump case, where they were saying that the remedy we want because we feel like some of these ballots weren't counted right is to throw out the entire vote for the entire electoral vote for the state. A lot of those courts were like, the relief you're seeking is unbelievable. This is so stupid. Even if your case was correct, the relief you're seeking is unreal. So just going through all of that. Risk of irreparable prejudice and urgency. So since there's a clear risk of irreparable prejudice to the rights of Palestinians in Gaza. The court concludes on the basis of the above considerations that the conditions required by its statute for it to indicate provisional measures are met. It is therefore necessary, pending its final decision, for the court to indicate certain measures in order to protect the rights claimed by South Africa and the court that the court has found to be plausible. Wait, see paragraph 54. Did I miss 54? Was that an important one? In the court's view, the facts and circumstances mentioned above are sufficient to conclude that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa and for which it is seeking protections are plausible. This is the case with respect to the right of the Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts identified in Article 3, and the right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligations under the convention. So that's them proving the standing and the prima facie. The court recalls that it has the power under the statute when a request for provisional measures have been made to indicate measures that are, in whole or in part, other than those requested. Article 75, paragraph 2 of the Rules of Court specifically refers to the power of the court, blah, blah, blah. In the present case, having considered the terms of the provisional measures requested by South Africa and the circumstances of the case, the court finds that the measures to be indicated need not be identical to those requested. So they're saying, like, yeah, we can basically say, Israel should do this or that. It's not the same thing that South Africa was requesting. The court considers that, with regard to the situation described above, Israel must, in accordance with its obligations under this Genocide Convention in relation to Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of this convention in particular, and then it lists out the genocide things. The court recalls that these acts fall within the scope of Article 2 of the convention when they are committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a group. The court further considers that Israel must ensure with immediate effect that its military forces do not commit any of the above described acts. The court is also of the view that Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. The court further considers that Israel must take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Israel must also take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure that preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention against members of the Palestinian group of the Gaza Strip. And 82, regarding the provisional measure requested by South Africa that Israel must submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to its order. The court recalls that it has the power, reflected in Article 78 of the Rules of the Court, to request the parties to provide information on any matter connected with the implementation of any provisional measures, as indicated. In view of the specific provisional measures it is decided to indicate, the court considers that Israel must submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month. As from the date of this order, the report so provided shall then be communicated to South Africa, which shall be given the opportunity to submit to the court its comments thereon. The court recalls that the order on provisional measures in Article 41, binding law. The court reaffirms the decision given in the present proceedings in no way prejudices the question of the jurisdiction of the court to deal with the merits of the case or any questions relating to the admissibility of the applications of the merits themselves, at least unaffected the rights of the governments of the Republic of South Africa and the State of Israel to submit arguments in respect to those questions. The court deems it necessary to emphasize that all parties to the conflict in the Gaza Strip are bound by international humanitarian law. It is gravely concerned about the fate of the hostages abducted during the attacks in Israel on the 7th of October 2023 and held since then by Hamas and other armed groups, and calls for the immediate unconditional release. Okay. And then so for these reasons, the court indicates the following provisional prejudges. I'm sorry, not prejudices. Indicates the following provisional measures. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Conventions of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of this convention, in particular, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to... So that's just naming out what constitutes genocide. The State of Israel shall ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit any acts described as in point 1 above. The State of Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. The State of Israel shall take, blah, 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 blah. So basically just saying, like, don't do these things. And then submit a report in a month. But that's basically all they said. So... they didn't issue the injunction that South Africa was looking for, saying that you have to stop all of your military activity. They basically just say, make sure you're not committing genocide. But yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Bomb site, and they only bombed during the day, and they lost so many crews as a result. It's a phenomenal new Apple series called Masters of the Air that shows this. The British came to the Americans and said, "Are you guys crazy? You're sending your pilots to die during the day?" And the Americans said, "Well, we want to make sure we are not hitting civilians. We're hitting military sites with this great. It was the second greatest invention after the atomic bomb of the Second World War, the Norden bomb site. That's not what you and the British did. You bombed at night indiscriminately, murdering millions of civilians. So by the definition of Norman Finkelstein, who says that whether you intentionally target civilians, which Israel does not, Israel loses hundreds of soldiers.
The whole point, Rabbi
Wait, no, but I'm asking, but I need to put one question to Norman Finkelstein.
Let me respond to your argument.
Was Britain a terrorist state fighting the Nazis?
Okay,
yes or no?
I will come
indiscriminately.
Yes,
I'd like to hear his response.
Let me ask Norman that. What I would say to that, for what it's worth, is that there was huge regret over things like the carpet bombing of Dresden, which led directly
to the Cologne, Essen, Dresden.
Which led directly, by the way.
It was April 1945. Let's go to Cologne. Let's go to Dresden. Let's go to Hamburg.
Let me finish. Which led directly to the Geneva Convention to try and prevent these things happening again. Many people think what's happening now in Gaza is a form of that happening again. Norman Finkelstein.
No. What's happening in Gaza is what the Americans did with the Norden bomb site. The Israelis are using surgical targeted strikes.
Well, they're killing a lot of children.
Because Hamas lives under their homes. Hamas builds.
Rabbi Shmuley, with respect, if Israel's being that precise, why is it killing so many children?
Firstly, I want to know what is the accuracy of your numbers, because I trust Hamas as much as
He doesn't answer anything. This is just stupid debate. Ugh.
Trust. They're complete liars. Secondly, Hamas, unfortunately, wants these children to die, because the more that die, the more you're going to challenge me on TV. Israel wants them to live. Israel withdrew in 2005. Hamas builds their military installations under these children's homes, under their kindergartens, under their nurseries, under their hospitals.
All right,
we now found 350 miles of tunnels under children.
At Destiny, but no implication one way or another that they believe Israel is already taking all measures to prevent genocide, as would be implied if it had said Israel must continue to do so. I don't know what point you're making. All they basically said was Israel is basically allowed to continue military operations, but they have to make sure that they don't genocide anybody, essentially.
Homes. That's the size of the New York subway system.
I want to be fair to both sides on time. Norman Finkelstein, your response.
What would you like me to respond to?
I suppose the analogy with World War II.
How does Finkelstein have time for these debates, but he couldn't talk to me? Really? This is a better use of your time?
And the fact that indisputably, many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of civilians died in that conflict, and the argument is it was for the greater good of defeating the Nazis. Do you see any parallel with wanting, and I completely understand Israel's desire, fervent desire, to eliminate Hamas after what they did on October the 7th, particularly as Hamas has stated again and again, they want to keep repeating it again and again. So on that particular argument about when you wage a war against whether it's the Nazis or Hamas, a lot of civilians tragically will get killed in the process, but ultimately that shouldn't stop you going ahead with the war to try and achieve your goal. What do you say to that?
What I would say to that is there's a very good reason why this case was brought before the International Court of Justice. That is, as I'm sure you know, that if you examine what Israel has done in Gaza since October 7th, by virtually every dimension you examine it, the intensity of the bombing, the density of the bombing, the magnitude of destruction of civilian dwellings, civilian infrastructure, the percentage, the absolute number of children killed, the relative number of children killed to combatants killed, the percentage of women and children versus men killed, the number of medical personnel killed, the number of journalists killed, the number of UN workers killed. By virtually every dimension that you examine the conflict, by virtually any and every metric that you examine the conflict, Israel's assault on Gaza, which we should bear in mind is among the most densely populated places on God's earth, and it has been sealed off from humanity since 2006. As Giora Eiland put it in March 2004, Giora Eiland was the head of the Israeli National Security Council. He described Gaza, and I'm quoting him now, as a huge concentration camp. That's not me, that's Giora Eiland, the former head of the Israeli National Security Council. So if you put all of these metrics together and you add in the context being a concentration camp in which half the people are children, 70% are refugees. If you add in the context and the metrics, there is a very good reason why Israel was brought before the International Court of Justice. Now, Mr. Shmuley has every right to question the authority of the numbers, the figures, and so forth. I am a strong believer in the right of Holocaust deniers to make a case before the public because, as John Stuart Mill once put it, we are all fallible, and being fallible, we have to always have a place in our minds open.
Do you think Dr. Avi's relative risk stats are difficult to explain? Yeah, I'll try to figure out a way to encapsulate this in a simple gotcha bite or like a bite-sized way. But I mean, like it's obvious, but it's not immediately intuitive, statistically speaking. I guess it's not something that's like immediately intuitive. You don't have a good grasp of basic stats. I guess, yeah.
The possibility that we are wrong. So, like Holocaust deniers, I do believe that Rabbi Mr. Shmuley should have the right to speak. However, granting that right, he has a very tall order. If a Holocaust denier wants to deny the Nazi Holocaust, he or she has to refute a vast corpus of scholarship attesting to the reality of the Nazi Holocaust. In the same way, Rabbi Shmuley, if he wants to deny that a plausible case for genocide can be made in Gaza, he has to refute a vast body of documentation. And that documentation ran, as it was presented by the South African application, it ran to 84 single-spaced pages with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of footnotes. Now, that's the first hurdle.
Are we really
allow me to finish.
No.
Allow me to finish.
Your debating style is to drone on, coma-inducing. That's how you debate.
Unironically, Finkelstein should be allowed to finish. That sounds really mean to say, but I do think that his talking speed is a problem. Listening to this, because he also is yapping a little bit. He didn't need to reiterate on every single one of these points too. Actually, never mind. Yeah, he could have summarized this a lot quicker. I don't have any sympathy. Never mind.
Debate. You try to put your opponents into slumber. For God's sake, you made your point. It's time for me to respond. That's a dialogue.
No,
you
I'm not done.
Like you did with Alan Dershowitz, and you dominated. You took 3/4 of the time. I won't allow it. Now let me respond. First of all, Piers, I'm glad that Norm has at least had the intellectual honesty to concede the first point. But the ICJ, the International Court, never ruled against Israel. Now notice he's saying that South Africa brought the case. They lost the case. First point. Because I've been attacking his credibility. For you to say, Piers, I'm attacking him Ad-Hominem, his personality, I'm not. The question is whether this man is a scholar or not. He has no tenure. He was denied tenure at DePaul University. He is only known because he's a Jewish anti-Semite. Now, number two, this is the 5th time he accused Israel of genocide. He started in 1982 in Lebanon. Now, what does genocide mean? It was coined by a Holocaust survivor in 1947 named Raphael Lemkin. Geno is an ethnicity. Side means murder. It is the murder of an ethnicity. Norm needs to make the case that Israel is slaughtering Palestinians because they're Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims. Well, then how does Israel have 1.9 million totally safe Israeli citizens who vote in the Knesset, an Israeli Arab judge who put an Israeli Jewish president in jail for rape, by the way? Why is that none of the Israeli Arabs have risen up to stop this genocide? Because it has nothing to do with
Let me ask you this.
It has to do with a date called October 7th.
Let me ask you this.
1,200 Jews were shot in the genitals, burned to death, slaughtered, and no democracy should allow that, except for one person, Norm Finkelstein. Because he has an irrational hatred of Jews.
Rabbi Shmuley, with respect, Norman Finkelstein is not the only person seriously concerned about what's happening in terms.
Is Shmuley correct? I don't even know what the fuck he's saying. Technically, number of people killed isn't actually an argument against genocide. I think it's an easy one to wheel out if somebody's saying some dumb shit on Twitter. But like, I mean, technically, you can attempt to genocide a group of people and not kill as many as you'd like. Oddly Gamers, thanks for the gifted 20 memberships. The focus here is that he is right, though, in that genocide very specifically denotes a desire to eliminate a certain group of people. There is a specific mens rea or intentionality behind genocide, and killing lots of people. None of the things here that Norm said puts you any closer to genocide. Intensity of the bombing, density of the bombing, magnitude with the destruction of civilian, whatever. None of this gets you closer to genocide. Like even if the civilian deaths were 1 million, right? Technically, if like Israel was just indiscriminately bombing the fuck out of Palestine to kill Hamas, there might be war crimes. It might be. Yeah, it might be a grave situation. There might be a ton of like international stuff violated, but like genocide is specifically referring to the intention to destroy a group of people along like, it's like ethnic, I think religious might be in there. We'd have to look under genocide convention definitions, but so like, yeah, that's what you want to focus on. But both of these guys are just like yapping.
Of Israel's response.
Genocide? Using the word genocide?
I would say the majority of the world right now is concerned about what's going on in Gaza.
Is President Biden
and believes that Israel's response is...
Oh, someone is saying the special intent is called dolus specialis. It's this special intent, or dolus, I don't know how to pronounce this, dolus specialis, that makes the crime of genocide so unique. In addition, case law has associated intent with the existence of a state or organizational plan or policy, even if the definition of genocide international does not include that element. Oh, I've never even heard this term before. Okay.
Now becoming wholly disproportionate. And again, I ask you this question. Netanyahu, incredibly unpopular back home in Israel. You know, probably wouldn't even be prime minister now if it hadn't been for this war, given the scale of the social unrest and protests over his attempt to thwart the power of the Supreme Court. So you've got a deeply unpopular prime minister, particularly with Israelis' own people, right, waging a war, and many people cynically think he's just going to keep doing this because it buys him more time. But if I could ask him, and I can't because he won't come on again on this program to date, I would simply say, when does this end? How many people are you prepared to kill on the other side before you declare mission accomplished? And why would you think, by the way, that killing so many innocent people in Gaza and destroying so much of the homes in Gaza, north and south, why would you think that that would end radicalization of people who may be sympathetic to Hamas? Why would it not have the opposite effect?
When I saw you face to face in your studio in London a few months ago, I told you I think that you've been fair on this conflict. So I respect your question. I want to take it seriously. First of all, Netanyahu's unpopularity means nothing. Churchill destroyed the Nazis, saved Western civilization, and immediately was kicked out by the British. He actually lost the election, as you well know. So that means nothing. It doesn't mean Churchill wasn't a great man. It means nothing. Number two, let's say, for example, look where I am. I'm in the beauty of South Florida. This is where I grew up. Imagine that 6 million Jews living in Israel say, you know what, we've had it. We've tried this state 75 years. The whole world hates us. They want to kill us. We have people like Norman Finkelstein calling us satanic, saying that we come from a boil of hell. We have Norman Finkelstein saying that he cheered hallelujah when the women were shot in the genitals and raped. So we're going to move to South Florida. They do a deal with Biden. Biden says, you know, it's cheaper for us to just move you guys to beautiful Florida than it is to give Israel. And Israel disappears, God forbid, in a very humanitarian way. No one dies. Now you're left with no Israel. Will that change for one moment, Piers? All of the women in Gaza now under Hamas, the teenage girls who have tires put around their heads who are burned to death by their brothers because they have sex before marriage? Will it change the fact that LGBTQ Palestinians have their genitals cut off and are castrated? Will it change the fact that any political...
The funniest thing in the world, really, you'd have to like finagle this argument a bit. And if Norm wanted to be, you know, real hardcore, you do this. Technically, in a weird way, this guy over here is kind of sort of making an argument for genocide. When he starts going in on like the culture of Palestinians and he starts talking about this cultural rot, the fact that they're inferior in their treatment of LGBT people, the fact that the way that they treat women is different, if anything, he's kind of sort of hinting in the direction of maybe they should be genocided. Like this is an ethnic group of people that shouldn't exist, almost, in a way, kind of. He's on his way there.
Will it change the fact that LGBTQ Palestinians have their genitals cut off and are castrated? Will it change the fact that any political protests on the part of Palestinians, no Israel anymore, against Hamas, have them shot 20 or 30 at a time by hooded terrorists? Will it change the fact that Palestinian Authority officials, are thrown off rooftops by Hamas, who did this in 2006 in a coup? Will it change the fact that there isn't one Arab democracy? Will it change the fact that in Syria, 600,000 Arabs, 600,000, Norm Finkelstein doesn't give a damn about them, were killed between 2011 and 2014? Israel is not the problem. Arab dictatorships, tyranny. Would it change the fact that Ismail Haniyeh is worth $4 billion? Would Would it change the fact that Khalid Mashal is worth $7 billion? It would change nothing. If Israel left the Middle East, the Arab world is still in crisis, killing teenagers, killing LGBTQ, destroying democracy, all dictatorship, kleptocracy. You have Mahmoud Abbas, who's a billionaire. You have Yasser Arafat, who not only died on the Forbes 400 richest men in the world, which is shocking, but his wife still lives in a penthouse paid for by the Palestinians in Paris. And one final thing, when Norman Finkelstein fabricates and says about the terrible plight of the Palestinians in Gaza, they were given about $100 billion over the past 18 years. More, that is triple per capita what the Marshall...
Is that true? How much money has gone to Palestine over 20 years? But Destiny's talking about Hamas, and he clearly wasn't. He was saying all the Arab states, and he was going into Syria, and blah, 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 and... Qatar has provided over $1 billion in reconstruction funds and stipends for port. Did he say $100 billion? Did I make that up? Huh.
Marshall Plan was given to Europeans. Look what they did with it. Germany, France, England. And you know what the Palestinians did with it? With what Hamas? They built tunnels with giant television screens where the Hamas Hitler, Yahya Ayash, is living now with his family. They didn't build one bomb shelter.
Let me go to Norman Finkelstein. Norman, the question I would have for you is this. Do you accept that Hamas need to be removed from power in Gaza?
He's not going to say yes. It's such an easy yes. Hamas, we don't need like radical, like dictatorships, okay, fine. But not like Islamic dictatorships. Can we get some secular dictatorship at least? Not like an Islamist radical fucking jihadist party. It's so easy to say Hamas probably shouldn't be there, but he's not going to because it sounds too much like he's signing off on the Israeli war. Or maybe he'll surprise me. We'll see what he says. Or he'll do the ultimate tactic of the IDF is a larger terrorist organization than Hamas has ever been. The IDF is worse than Hamas ever. So if the IDF remains in power, then Hamas should. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see what he says.
Need to be removed from power in Gaza.
I would say that the preeminent, I would say that the preeminent question at the present moment ought to be, do I accept the fact that the Israeli government ought to be removed from power?
Well, hang on.
The Vyvanse gave me the ability to see into the future. That's why I like the Vyvanse so much. It lets me see only about like 20 minutes. Maybe as I take up my dose more, I'm on 250 milligrams per day right now. Maybe as I take more, I'll get more future sight. But
that's a different question. No, with respect, that's a different question. I can ask you that separately. But the specific question I have for you, particularly given what you said after October the 7th, is simply, should Hamas remain in power?
And should Hamas remain in power, I think that the Palestinian people should be able to determine their own future and determine their leadership. That's just a basic democratic
What is your
principle.
personal opinion?
No, I don't decide what people should do with their lives.
You've expressed many strong opinions about it. Hang on. Rabbi Shmuley, I can do an interview, thank you. The problem I have with that response is you're very quick to level the charge of genocide at Israel, and many people would agree with you, many wouldn't. But you're not so keen to be held.
I can't believe he's giving pushback to Norm on this debate, and he let this guy yap on the most retarded ad-homs for like 20 minutes. What the fuck?
To account for your view about Hamas. And I don't see how anyone, after what they did on October the 7th, could possibly conclude they should stay in power.
Piers, I don't want to have to redo the interviews you did with me. I was very clear about my opinion when you asked about October 7th. I was also very clear as to what I believe Hamas should or shouldn't do regarding its leadership or its current power in Gaza. I've not tried to evade any of your questions.
For those who...
Then why can't you just answer that? Just say like, hey, like, probably shouldn't have Hamas there, right?
For those who may not have seen the previous interviews, for those who may not have seen our previous conversations, I simply ask again.
That's fine.
It is a simple question. Should Hamas stay in power? Because Israel's whole argument is that they have to keep going with this warfare to eradicate Hamas. And my question for you is, do you think that in principle, Hamas should stay in power?
Well, Piers, I'm going to answer you because I never fear the truth. And I'm not going to try to evade your question.
I only deal in facts.
Let's take a simple metric. We'll take the question of children killed.
Oh my God, answer the question. Should Hamas stay in power or not?
These are answers to different questions.
Just answer the question, Norm, for God's sake. You said you don't want to evade the truth. Should Hamas stay in power or not? Answer the question.
Piers, either you're going to moderate the program or...
Oh my God, but he's not going to answer it. Bro, it's such an easy question. How are you even debating on the level of this fucking clown on the right? Shut him down. He was wrong on the ICJ. He should have crucified him. He should have made him stick that out. You're saying the ICJ ruled that there was no genocide? You're telling me they were able to ascertain that charge in 1 month, Rabbi? What a ridiculous fucking claim. You should have raked him over the coals for this. Why is he not just answering this question?
There's honestly no point in continuing.
I do think it's I have to say, I do think it's a very simple question, and it goes right to the heart.
No, it's not.
It goes right to the heart of Israel's argument about why they are continuing
Piers,
to execute the war.
Piers, how about letting me decide whether it's a simple question? How about letting me decide?
Well, either Hamas stays in power or it doesn't it?
Okay.
I don't think you have to be a professor to answer the question.
Piers, there's a difference between whether or not Hamas stays in power and whether Hamas should be in power. So let me get into the stays in power is a military question. Should be in power, well, let's look at it. I say if Hamas, which is responsible for the killings of 30...
He's going to give the numbers of people that Hamas has killed and say, if Hamas is responsible for this many deaths and we're saying they should be removed from power, well, then the IDF, who's killed 29,000 civilians, should absolutely be removed from power first. Something like that. Here we go.
6 children on October 7th should not stay in power. Then you must certainly agree, Piers, and I'm going to kindly ask you to please answer me. You must surely agree then that Israel, which has killed now approximately 12,000 children and is plausibly accused of having killed them in the course of a genocide. Now, I'm going to ask you, Piers, to please answer the question.
What is your source for 12,000 children? What's the source? What is your source, please?
Okay.
What's your source?
Piers,
Palestinian Health Authority.
He didn't even get to ask Piers the question while Finkelstein is dodging the question, and now this guy wants to fight over the sourcing of the debt, bro.
Run by Hamas, we know that.
Run by Hamas. Wait.
No, Rabbi Shmuley, you don't interrupt.
It's
It's actually an important question and an important moment in the debate. Continue, Norman Finkelstein.
So I have to ask you, Piers, if you believe that Hamas should not stay in power because it killed 36 children on October 7th, then you must surely agree several times, 1,000 times more emphatically that the Israeli government should not be in power because it killed 12,000 children, not as collateral damage.
What would your response be to that Finkelstein argument if he wheels it out in your debate? It's just like, it's a stupid argument on so many different levels. The Israeli government has shown that it is capable of making peace with its neighbors, even neighbors that it historically had huge fights with. The Israeli government is held democratically responsible by its population, so at least there's some pressure there. The Israeli government responds to international pressure. They've shown it in the past historically, they've shown it in the modern conflict now. The Israeli government opens itself up to evaluations from other parties, whether it's people doing investigation. The Israeli government has literally, like people will say things in chat like, you trust Israel to look at itself and to audit itself, blah, blah, blah. I mean, like, Haaretz is literally a left-leaning publication that is inside of Israel, like that a lot of you guys love to cite when it comes to talking about Israeli crimes in the West Bank and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, the idea, yes, I would trust the Israeli government 1 billion times more than Hamas, an Islamic jihadist, fundamentalist organization that answers to nobody, runs itself like a theocratic dictatorship, doesn't hold elections, doesn't respond to international pressure unless it's around training their troops or sending weapons to go kill Israeli citizens. Like, yeah, of course. Like, it's such an easy, like with this level of question, like, well, should the US government remain in power? Should the British government remain in power? Should literally any government anywhere in the entire world remain in power? Because they probably killed more people than Hamas. Such a stupid question.
But plausibly, according to 15 of the 17 judges on the highest judicial body in the world. Okay,
you said that point. Okay, here's my answer.
Here's my answer. And a genocide.
Here's my answer. You haven't so far answered my question. If you do, I will give you an emphatic answer to yours.
Ooh.
So let me just ask again, should Hamas stay in power?
My answer is...
Before he gives an answer, there is a good, complicated question, or complicated way to answer this question that is nuanced, takes into account the Palestinian plight, and satisfies the prompt that Piers has given, right? Well, should Hamas remain in power? That's complicated. Hamas was technically voted into power, right? If you don't like Hamas, okay, fine. Well, what about the Palestinian Authority? Because that's the counter government that you're championing. Well, guess what? Mahmoud Abbas also suspended elections. He hasn't been voted on either. So if you don't like Hamas, you must not like the PA either, because neither of these are democratically elected people. What happens if you get rid of Hamas, you hold elections, and then they elect Hamas again? Then what do, Piers? Like, do you deny elections to the Palestinian people? Are they not allowed to elect leadership? What if they want to have, like, a theocratic dictatorship, whatever, right? I mean, like, these are technically answers to satisfy this question, and they're more complicated and nuanced, but I don't know why, but you can answer these too. Any of these are satisfactory, I think, and they hint at a little bit of the complicatedness of the situation that is existing on the ground. I don't know why he wouldn't just wheel out any of these explanations. Other than the fact that it would take him 10 minutes to, I guess, get through anything. I guess Finkelstein is about plat, but Shmuley is definitely bronze-based.
To yours. So let me just ask again, should Hamas stay in power?
My answer is, if we apply one standard
that's not an answer.
across the board...
No, that's not an answer.
If we apply one standard across the board, I am perfectly happy to say Hamas should be removed from power if you agree that several thousand times
you made that
more
point. Here's my answer.
emphatically the Israeli government should be removed from power.
What does that even mean? The Israeli government should be, it's like every single member of the Knesset should be banned and then not allowed to run again? Or you dismantle the entire Israeli government? Or what does that mean?
There are two completely separate questions, and I would answer it like this.
No, they're not.
Well, I'm going to explain to you.
I'm
going to explain why I believe they are.
I will listen.
Because Israel's response was a response to an appalling terror attack. I believed after October the 7th, Hamas rescinded any right to continue having any power over Gaza and should be removed. The only debate would then be how would that best be done? And I had serious question marks about Israel's response in response to whether the current. Hang on. Let me finish my sentence, please. And in response to your question, Norman Finkelstein, about Israel's government, no, I do not believe they should continue, actually. I think this government has lost the faith of its people. I think Netanyahu in particular has lost all confidence and popularity with the Israeli people who blame him for what happened on October the 7th. And so, no, I don't think they should stay in power, actually. I think both countries should have new leadership and new governments. That's my answer. But again, I'll just come back to you. Hang on. I don't equivocate either with the other. You can divorce the two questions. You can say, after October the 7th, should Hamas stay in power?
Sound the incorrect use of equivocate alarm.
Yes or no, and then you can have a question mark about whether this current Israel government should stay in power because of the way they responded. They're two different questions. But you, Norman Finkelstein, so far... Well, hang on. Wait a second, Rabbi Shmuley. I just want to get one answer out of Norman Finkelstein as to whether you will answer my question about whether Hamas should stay in power.
Piers, if you use a single standard across the board...
Why was it incorrect? Wait, why was what incorrect? My brain just wiped. This is...
Wait a second, Rabbi Shmuley. Two different questions. But you, Norman Finkelstein, so far... Well, hang on.
The correct answer is Hamas. Also, the real true answer is Hamas shouldn't stay in power because you can't negotiate with Hamas. It's just not a good negotiating partner. It's just... And they lost. And actually... wait. Pierce's answer was correct. I think it was Pierce's answer, right? That they lost the right to rule, basically, once they did that attack on October 7th. If you don't count any of the earlier actions. That probably removed any mandate that they would have had to be seen as, like, authentic rulers of a people. That's insane.
I just want to get one answer out of Norman Finkelstein as to whether you will answer my question about whether Hamas should stay in power.
Oh, why was the equivocate? Oh, when you equivocate on something, it means that you're mincing words, basically. So like, let's say that my brother punches me, and then my sister, flicks a piece of paper at me, and I go, I wouldn't equivocate my sister flicking paper at me with my brother punching me. That wouldn't be equivocate. That would be equating. But let's say that my brother punches me. And then later on, we're getting into a fight, and he's like, "Oh, come on! All I did was tapped you earlier." I would say, "Tap me? You're equivocating. You didn't tap me. You punched me." That would be an equivocation. Yeah. You don't equivocate two different things when you're equating them or comparing them. Equivocation is usually when you're trying to, hide from a particular. You're mincing words. You're trying to obfuscate the severity of something. You're equivocate. You're downplaying. That's like equivocation, basically.
Piers, if you use a single standard across the board, then I accept your conclusion. So long as you're being morally as well as legally consistent, I have personally no problem with that conclusion. However, I would want to say, Piers, and I'm trying to be honest, but also intellectually consistent in this matter. You said the Hamas disqualified...
Yes, I would argue Finkelstein's whole career is based on equivocation. They've killed 12,000 children. Okay, what does that mean? Killed 12,000 children, because you're evoking the idea of 5-year-olds being killed. What's the age cutoff here, right? Are these fighting age, combatant people? Is it literally just children that are hiding in their cribs, or they're under their mom's bosoms? What do we, when we're evoking this here, right? Would you consider that an equivocation? I think we could say that equivocation.
...fight itself from leadership because of the atrocity that was committed, or atrocities that were committed October 7th.
Yes.
Now, if you agree with the head of the National Security Council of Israel at the time, in 2004, that Hamas is a huge concentration camp. I'm quoting him now.
Gaza, you mean?
Would you also agree that October 7th was a reaction to confining 1 million children in a concentration camp?
Like this, 1 million children.
Okay, Piers, he's not
You
answering
want
your
to
question.
see-
He never will. But Piers, I have to
All right, let me bring in Rabbi Shmuley, because he's been waiting patiently. More patient than you normally do.
Every time, there's one main reason I wanted to do this debate, and Piers, thank you for having me. I'll tell you what it is. There were 6 million Jews who were turned into ash and lampshades and shot, and they're in,
Oh my
graves.
God.
The only tomb is our memory. Norman Finkelstein is a Holocaust denier. He has said that David Irving, the #1 Holocaust denier on earth, who Britain despises to their credit, who lost huge against
Holy
every
shit, he's got my... Do we have the same Apple Watch?
that he said he's a great historian. Every time he calls Gaza a concentration camp, as if there's gas chambers there, as if there's
It is. Look, you can even see his little notification coming up.
SS Einsatzgruppen going around shooting Palestinians, he denies he is a Holocaust denier. Now, why
Wait, is this guy left-handed, or... Why does he have his watch on his right hand? Do you think he's wearing it on the wrong wrist? Somebody look this up, if this guy's left-handed or not. The f***?
does this matter? Because why won't Norman Finkelstein answer your simple question about whether Hamas should stay in power? And don't tell me this is Ad-Hominem. In 2016, he gave an interview where he said that he essentially makes his income through giving speeches. He said that he gave 40 slips to his accountant for speeches against Israel.
That doesn't mean he doesn't mean what he said.
He has 2 watches? Oh shit, you're right, he does have 2 watches. What the f***?
1 second, hold on.
It doesn't mean he doesn't mean what he said.
You don't wear your watch on your right wrist? No, wait, aren't you supposed to wear your watch on your non-dominant hand? Am I crazy?
No, 1 second, hold on. If he attacks Hamas, he said that his speeches went from 40 to only 4, he'll be down to 0. Now, here's the point. You're right. It doesn't mean that. But when you pressed him in your first debate, and you did so admirably, Piers, Shani Luke's parents stayed at my house for the past 10 days. She was the woman who, within an hour or two of the attack, a German-Israeli woman, was put dead, shot in the head, stripped naked. I maintained that she was the
Bro, oh my god, these are the types of posts I banned from my subreddit. We get it. Like, it was brutal. Yeah, congratulations, bro.
most desecrated woman in world history in terms of how many people saw her naked body. As that was happening, Norman Finkelstein wrote, "It warms every fiber of my soul" about these scenes in Gaza. And glory, glory, hallelujah. Now, to your credit, you pressed him on this in the first interview. And you know what he said? He said, "I had no idea. I only thought 50 Jews had died. I didn't know 1,200. So 2 questions. Number 1, Norman Finkelstein, how many Jews need to die before you are no longer celebrating their death and saying glory, hallelujah? Is it 51? Is it 500? You know, 1 black man was murdered.
I would give Norman the benefit of the doubt here because he did publish that immediately, and then he did kind of retract it where Norman was like, I didn't realize how serious it was. But I did do this research. I don't know if this was on stream or off stream. I'm pretty sure I read that. Oh, actually, this might have been part of a forethought post that Norman Finkelstein has no sympathy for the Charlie Hebdo people. That's wild as fuck. Like, that's indefensible. That's like deportation levels of commentary. If I was a dictator, you would be deported from my country. Oh, did we do this on stream? Let's say, amidst all this death and destruction, 2 young Jews barged into the headquarters of the editorial offices of Der Stürmer, and they killed the staff for having humiliated them, degraded them, demeaned them, insulted them, queried Norman Finkelstein, a professor of political science and author of numerous books, including The Holocaust Industry and Method and Madness. How would I react to that, said Finkelstein, who's the son of Holocaust survivors. Finkelstein was drawing an analogy between a hypothetical attack on the German newspaper, the Nazis, and the deadly January 7th attack at the Paris headquarters of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo that left 12 people dead, including its editor and prominent cartoonists. The weekly is known for printing controversial material, including derogatory cartoons about the Prophet Muhammad in 2006 and 2012. Satire is when one directs it either at oneself, let's see. Satire is when one directs it either at oneself, causes his or her people to think twice about what they are doing and saying, or directs it at people who have power and privilege, he said. But when somebody is down and out, desperate, destitute, and you mock them, when you mock a homeless person, that is not satire, Finkelstein said. That is, I give you the word sadism. There's a very big difference between satire and sadism. Charlie Hebdo is sadism. It's not satire. So 2 despairing and desperate young men act out their despair and desperation against this political pornography, no different than Der Stürmer, who in the midst of all of this death and destruction decide it's somehow noble to degrade, demean, humiliate, and insult the people. I'm sorry. Maybe it's a very politically incorrect. I have no sympathy for the staff of Charlie Hebdo. Should they have been killed? Of course not. But of course, Stryker shouldn't have been hung. I don't hear that from many people, said Finkelstein. He was the one who stood trial on charges at Nuremberg following World War II. He was hung for those cartoons. Jesus Christ. Also, I'm so curious. Did Charlie Hebdo make fun of Arabs or make fun of, like, Muslims? I thought they were just making fun of... wasn't the comic like a picture of a whole bunch of people naked, like Jesus and Muhammad and other people? Am I wrong on that? I don't remember the original cartoons that they got. Was it just Muhammad? I thought they did naked, but I know obviously it was the Muhammad one that got him killed. Oh, I might be thinking of a fucking South Park thing actually. For all the naked people, maybe.
Murdered in Minnesota. His name was George Floyd, and tens of millions of people marched against his murder.
Ronnie, stop! You're banned for 1 week. Stop linking the same thing. 1 day. I'll give you 1 day. No, I'm giving you 3 days. Stop linking the same thing over and over and over. You've linked this 400 times. I see it. I know. Yes, 200-page fucking whatever. I see it. Yes. Stop, please. God.
Less than. But for you, it would have had, we need 49 other dead black men before they start marching. Number one. Number two, what you're confessing, Norm, is that you are a joke of a historian. Because your defense to Piers Morgan was, I didn't know. I have 3 people who do my Twitter. I gave it to them. By the way, I'd love to know even one name of those 3. I dare you to mention their names because I'd like to question them because I believe you're fabricating that as well. I think you wrote this yourself. You did not give it to 3 people who work for you on Twitter. But here's my question. You claim to be a serious historian. What kind of serious historian before they even know the facts says, I love seeing dead Jews? You admit you knew nothing. You say that you had no knowledge, and you were saying, glory, hallelujah, may more Jewish women be shot in the vagina and have their breasts cut off. Now, later when Piers Morgan said to you, hey, Norm, at least take it off. At least delete it. You now admit 1,200 died. And you know what you said? It's part of the historical record. So you are a fraudulent historian by your own admission. You said this fraud that you are thrilled that Jews were shot in the vagina, women were gang is part of history, but it's a false history. So
is there evidence that anybody was shot in the vagina? Is this a real thing? Is there like strong evidence that this happened, or?
Be fair, Piers. When you tell me Ad-Hominem, come on. The man either has credibility or he has no credibility.
Okay.
There's no tenure. Yeah. Okay.
Let me give the final word to Norma Finkelstein.
The issue before us is Gaza. It's not me. Now, there is a temptation, obviously, on my part to defend my professional honor and my personal honor, but I am going to
I'm going to give this moment to the Palestinians who are suffering.
I'm going to withstand that temptation and end on the note that this conversation began and was supposed to continue. And so I would say that if you are indicting me, then you are also indicting the sanity of the 15 judges on the International Court of Justice, including, quite surprising to me, including the American judge. Now, if you examine the proceedings closely, which I did, each judge had the option of including in their decision what's called a declaration. And the German judge did exercise that option and wrote a 5-page declaration in which he distanced himself from certain of the findings. However, it was very noticeable that Israel's main ally in the world, the judge from that country, the American judge, did not issue a declaration, which is to say, she went along with the conclusion without qualification, that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. Now, I would want to end on the note, as you know, Piers, genocide is the crime of crimes under international law. To be plausibly guilty of the crime of genocide, it's a very, very high standard, And it seems to me require a very high degree of dementia to deny that crimes on a vast scale are occurring in Gaza.
Okay,
Thank you.
We're going to leave it there.
That is a blood libel. That is a blood libel. It's a lie. The ICJ never said that. That is pure blood libel. Norm, you may as well say that we Jews mix blood into of Christian children into our matzahs, boys in the wells of Europe. You are guilty of a blood libel.
This guy probably does.
ICJ never said that. They ruled in Israel's favor. You, sir, are a liar, and you are guilty of a libel against your own people and against your own parents. Your parents were not haters. They were victims. They did not hate Germans. The Germans hated them and tried to murder
Rabbi
them.
Shmuley,
Your parents' memory and apology.
We're going to leave it there.
Jesus
Norma Finkelstein,
Christ.
Rabbi Shmuley, thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Piers.
Ooh, calling Pierce out. Thank you. Only thank you to him.